Hello everyone, and welcome to another in our speaker series at the Arctic Institute of North America. I'm Patty Wells, and I'm going to introduce you to our next speaker. Suddenly I've forgotten your name. Dr. Eleanor Bash is here this evening. She's a postdoctoral associate in the Department of Geography at the University of Calgary and also at Waterloo. And she specializes in image-based analysis, monitoring glacial melt and modeling of glacier mass change. So as a female scientist, she has also a great interest in bringing science to the attention of young women in an effort to try to get them involved in this kind of hard science. She serves as a president of the board for the Girls on Ice Canada Society, a Revelstoke-based nonprofit organization. In partnership with Alpine Club Canada and Inspired Girls Expeditions, Girls on Ice offers an annual field science program for high school females to promote their participation in the natural sciences. So she's going to give us a little talk about this work that she does specifically. Thanks very much. And now I'm going to turn off the light so that you can see the screen. So have a good look at Eleanor now, because she's going away. Thanks.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you guys for being here. I'm really excited to give a talk about Girls on Ice as opposed to my research. Because it's been a passion project for me for a number of years. So as Patty mentioned, I'm the president of the board for the Girls on Ice Canada Society, and we run an expedition for high school girls in partnership with the Alpine Club of Canada and Inspiring Girls Expeditions, which is based at the Oregon State University, and financial support from a number of other organizations, including the Garfield Weston Foundation, NSERC's Promo Science Program, Open Mountains Project, and the Association of Canadian Mountain Guides. So Girls on Ice Canada, as the title describes, is an experiential learning program for Canadian high school girls. It aims to foster scientific inquiry and mountain pursuits in young women through these immersion programs. And I want to just note that as an organization, we're trying to morph our language a little bit, and so I've used women with an X to note that we are inclusive of anyone in our programs who doesn't identify as a man. Part of the inspiration for giving this talk today, rather than a talk about my Arctic fieldwork, is the recent event of the International Day of Women and Girls in Science that's celebrated by the UN. And the UN recognizes that both science and gender equality are vital for achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals that have been internationally agreed upon. And in fact, the Director General of the UN said in an address on February 11th this year that the world shouldn't be deprived of the potential, the intelligence, or the creativity of the thousands of women who are victims of deep-seated inequality and prejudice. And that statement applies to women around the world, but we focus our work here in Canada, on women here in Canada, to do our part to try and turn this around. And the UN has research showing that less than 30% of researchers worldwide in STEM fields are women, and less than 30% of female students in university choose to pursue STEM fields. More research has shown that by the age of 6, girls already have ideas about what they're capable of because of their gender. And by university level, women are showing self-reporting their interest in science is actually affected by their perceived perception of bias towards men in their classes. So women are actually saying they're not interested in science, but that perception is skewed by their experience of gender bias. We've seen that at the national level, Canadian funding agencies have been found to show negative bias toward applications from female PIs when PIs are evaluated rather than the science contained in their applications. So these are systematic problems that need to be addressed. And we're trying to do that through Girls on Ice Canada by counteracting these barriers through meaningful experience with science and the outdoors. This program here in Canada was co-founded by myself and 2 other scientists who are alumni of the U of C in 2015. And so far we've run expeditions in the summer of 2018 and 2019 in Rogers Pass in Glacier National Park in BC. But we aren't the first ones to start this program, and so I want to start off with a little bit of history about where this comes from. Dr. Erin Pettit is at Oregon State University in the College of Earth, Ocean, and Atmospheric Sciences, and she founded this program during her own graduate studies in 1999 in Washington on the South Cascade Glacier. So the first Girls on Ice expedition ran in 1999, and since then it's expanded, and she's now the executive director of Inspiring Girls Expeditions, which is an umbrella organization that we partner with to run Girls on Ice Canada, but also partners with organizations running expeditions around the world. So in 2012, the programs expanded from 1 program in Washington to 2 programs, 1 in Washington and 1 in Alaska. In 2017, we ran 4 programs, including a program in Switzerland and a kayaking program in Alaska, Girls in Icy Fjords. In 2018, we ran our first Girls on Ice Canada program and also started another new program, Girls on Rock, in Colorado. That's based at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And in 2019, we added yet another program, Girls on Water. So we're expanding this offering of educational expeditions to young women in tandem with the increase in demand that we've seen in applications. So we're seeing more and more applications, and we want to be able to offer this experience to more and more young women. But why is this important? There's research that shows that women have to feel that they have to present more evidence in order to be seen as equally competent as their male counterparts. Women feel caught between the perceptions that science requires masculine qualities, but there's a cultural imperative to be feminine. I wanted to look nice today, so I wore a skirt. Women face the maternal wall, which is the idea that women are going to be less committed to their career after the time that they choose to have a family. And there's also the fact that women, as well as men, can be biased against women in these masculine work environments. So we have a lot to overcome in trying to change this systematic problem of not having women in science. And all of these experiences are felt more strongly by faculty members and women who are female but not white. So the graph on the bottom here is showing the % of female respondents in a survey. This is a survey of faculty in the US, reporting having to provide more evidence of competence than their peers. So this is a survey sort of investigating this first point here. And the survey found that Black faculty members, female faculty members, are much more likely to feel that they have to provide more evidence of their competence than their counterparts, female faculty who are white, Latina, or Asian American. Oh. Okay. So a lot of people have probably heard of this idea of a leaky pipeline. So the leaky pipeline is a metaphor that's existed for a long time to sort of describe this attrition, higher rates of attrition of women versus men through post-secondary education. So the number of women and men who are entering university degrees is roughly equal. And in the past, there's been fewer and fewer women in programs as you get into higher degrees. But recently, research reanalyzing 30 years of data has shown that this leak doesn't really exist anymore. So the proportional number of men and women entering university is roughly the same as those who are finishing their PhDs. But there's still this imbalance in women in STEM fields in their career. And so what this particular study was saying by Miller and Y, that in order to correct this disparity, we need to focus on these differences before students get to university. So if we want to increase the number of women who are in science fields in their career, we need to increase the number of women who choose to enter science fields in university. And this kind of disparity doesn't just exist in science. So I'm a scientist. This is the perspective that I come from. And it's certainly one of my reasons for wanting to be part of this program. But we see the same kind of imbalances in mountain outdoor pursuits and mountain outdoor fields. So a recent article was published just this past summer in the Canadian Avalanche Association publication that surveyed all the members of the Canadian Avalanche Association, the Association of Canadian Mountain Guides, and the Canadian Ski Guide Association. And what the survey found is that only 27% of members identify as female, so that's all outdoor professionals in Western Canada. 94% of respondents identify as white. And most female and non-white respondents report feelings of exclusivity and gender discrimination within their peer groups. But interestingly, most respondents also didn't perceive that there was an imbalance within their field. So something's going on there. But non-white and non-male members report higher rates of mental health challenges. So these kinds of imbalances and discrimination and exclusivity that are going on both in the mountain professional world and in the STEM fields create mental health challenges for women and non-white participants. And one thing that stands out to me here also is that there could also be similar reasons for decreasing reported interest from female prospective professionals in mountain sports as there are in STEM fields, that they're feeling this bias and self-reporting lower interest because of that exclusive nature of the community. But one of the main reasons that it's so important to address these problems is that there's tons of research out there that shows that greater diversity in science leads to greater scientific and societal gains, that diversity increases capacity for problem solving and provides better solutions to problems. And so when we're thinking about addressing forthcoming global problems, we need to have the most diverse set of perspectives to find the best solutions. So Girls on Ice and Inspiring Girls Expeditions comes from a set of core values that are trying to address this problem of imbalance, both in STEM fields and in mountaineering fields, through a number of ways, including reducing barriers and increasing participation in science. And we do this by offering our program tuition-free. So this actually allows us to attract the most diverse number of participants from all kinds of different backgrounds. Our program is not a reward for academic achievement. So we don't look at participants' grades when they're applying. We want to find people who are going to feel inspired and benefit and be excited to be part of this program, regardless of their academic history. And we want to do that because our goal is to inspire curiosity, inspire leadership, and confidence within participants so that they can succeed going forward. We want to provide participants with a meaningful experience. And we do this through hands-on learning. So by being in the field, by spending 12 days in the wilderness, our students are immersed in field science. They design and carry out their own experiments on topics of their choice with instructors as guides rather than leaders. And they take on leadership roles for the team. So we actually ask participants to take responsibility for what's happening on a regular basis over the course of the program so that they take ownership of their experience. And then finally, we really try and stress the connections between field science, the outdoor skills, and creative skills. So we actually have artists who participate as instructors and visitors on our programs to try and create links between science and art to really encourage participants to look at a situation from different angles. We get a lot of pushback on why we offer this program only for girls. Why don't we offer boys on ice? Or why don't we just call it students on ice and take students from any gender? But there's research that shows that having mentors who are similar to you is part of what makes career opportunities feel available. So we provide female mentors to female students to show them what kind of options they have in the future. We want to show young women that they belong in the outdoors and in field science, and by doing that, by participating in this program, they have a chance to feel that in a safe environment. By having single gender programs only for women, we are able to have candid and honest discussions about the kinds of barriers that people are facing. And it allows girls a chance to escape the societal pressures placed on them in a traditional classroom setting, and really to take the opportunity to step forward and lead in situations where they may not feel comfortable in mixed gender settings. So these are all really lofty goals for a 12-day program that runs once a summer. But we've carefully chosen an educational philosophy that helps us provide this kind of learning. So in sort of the three areas that we really focus on in our program, in mountaineering, in science, and in leadership, we try and build a scaffolding for growth that culminates in a peak experience. So we lay a foundation in the very beginning of the program in all of these three areas for participants to start building on that foundation and taking ownership over their experience and sort of building to this peak experience. And we believe that student-led learning leads to ownership and empowerment. So rather than lecturing in the field, we, as instructors, serve as guides to try and help students come to their own answers. And I've seen this firsthand in teaching a lesson that we call Glaciers 101. And from the very first time that these girls see a glacier, we take some silent reflection time for them to make observations, and then we have a discussion. And I've seen girls who have never been hiking before, they've never been outside the city, and they can come up with the definition of a glacier through their own conversation without me needing to tell them what it is, which is a pretty amazing experience to witness. So we talk a lot in our organization about the difference between being in your comfort zone and your growth zone. And so we try and push participants to feel a little bit uncomfortable because we think that's where we make the most gains in terms of growth. So we ask them to do something that's a little bit harder than what they thought they could do. We ask them to take on a science project that's a little bit more than what they've ever done before. And with the guidance and mentorship of our instructors, we've seen that this can help to grow their feelings of their capacity, their own capacity to be a scientist, to tackle difficult physical challenges, and to lead their peers. And we've tried to develop a program that's unique to Canada. So we saw an opportunity back in 2015 when we founded this program and started working towards making it happen here in Canada, that there were hundreds of Canadian applicants for programs that were running in the US, and there are so few positions available that there's a ton of space to provide this to Canadian girls. And because Canada is kind of like the US, but it's not really, this program offers Canadian girls access to Canadian wilderness and offers a chance for Canadian girls to connect with other girls from across the country. And for us to provide mentorship and community that's rooted in Canada, so that going forward, there's a community that's built here. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview about how these expeditions look. We spent 12 days in Rogers Pass and start off front country camping at the Île Silhouette campground, and then travel to the backcountry to the Asulkin cabin, and then finally spend the last 2 days at the University of Calgary's Biogeoscience Institute in Kananaskis country, where girls can wrap up their projects and we do some final reflections. This is last year's team, the 2019 team. Towards the beginning of their expedition, they had a chance to meet, I can't remember her name now, this woman who was kayaking across Canada, and they happened to meet her in Revelstoke. So it was a cool opportunity for them to meet another inspiring woman. So we try and lay early on the foundation for building community and building perception of a team through in-depth discussions. The girls are expected to give presentations. Here, this photo in the bottom is at the Asulkin hut. There's 2 girls every evening who give a presentation after dinner about something that they learned over the course of the day. And we actually have a whole team of volunteers that help us hike textbooks and science gear and climbing gear up to this cabin so that they have resources available while they're undertaking these projects. And then we ask the girls, as I mentioned before, to take responsibility over the everyday life of the team. And so here also there's a couple girls who are just coming back from collecting water for the hut. So we really try and create a situation where the team can feel stronger together to tackle the big challenges that they have ahead. So the scaffolding in the physical sense is starting off with day hikes. So we stay at this front country campground and we spend several days just learning how to move in the wilderness, how to hike, how to walk up steep trails, how to use your poles, all in preparation for the day that the team travels up to the Asulkin cabin. So this photo here is from the trail on the way up to the Asulkin cabin. It climbs a really steep moraine up into the alpine, and so it's a really big challenge, but can be also a really rewarding day for the team to finally make it to the place where they're going to be for the next week. And once we're there, we start laying a foundation for going even higher into the alpine. The girls learn how to walk on a rope team. They learn how to wear crampons. They learn how to travel safely on a glacier, all to move towards a peak experience of actually summiting a small peak in the area. And so that feeling of accomplishment, again, from the day that we go onto the summit, really helps to solidify the skills that they've learned, and particularly their feeling of their own capability to do these kinds of things. And similarly, we lay the scaffolding down in the sense of the science that we're doing. So we start off with lots of instructor-led discussions, instructor-led activities. We try and show them how we do science, talk about our own careers, and even talk about the basics of how do you make good scientific observations. So on the very first day, we often teach a lesson about the difference between making assumptions and inferences versus making an observation for science, so they have the foundation to go forward in doing their own science. And by the time they make it up to the hut, we ask them to actually take on a project. And so these students will actually identify what it is that they're interested in understanding more about the environment that we've seen. And then we help them to design and execute an experiment. So these are some experiments digging snow pits and looking at the interior of crevasses, looking at the stratigraphy in the ice. We've had students look at differential snowmelt, at the algae living on top of the snow, all kinds of things at ecology. What else do I have here? Hydrology. This was an experiment here where students wanted to know how different colors of rocks affect snowmelt in their vicinity, right? So getting at the idea that, that the albedo has some effect, and really trying to connect these small experiments to the broader context of the environment that we've been looking at. So even though they have to take on something that's really bite-sized that they can finish, there's all kinds of connections that we can make to the broader ecosystem and watershed that we're looking at and living in. So here's another one. We had student, again, look at the algae on top of the snow, looking at concentrations in different parts of the snowpack. And we had a team, our first year, who actually were really interested in the behavior of ground squirrels around the hut and how they might interact with human objects, and designed a really detailed experiment that involved mapping all the things the ground squirrels were eating, setting out human objects for them to interact with, and documenting everything the ground squirrels were doing around the cabin for 3 full days. So this is the map that they produced of all of the plants around the cabin. Finally, it's time to leave the hut. And this picture is from the hike down last summer. And these are actually the team from 2019, and also this amazing team of volunteers that we have who hike in with the girls when they go up to the Asulkin cabin, drop everything off and hike out. And then at the end of the program, they hike back up to the cabin, we high five along the trail, and then they pick up all of our stuff and hike it down for us. It's pretty awesome. So we try and make time with the volunteers, because they're a whole nother resource of amazing women that these girls can interact with to learn who they are and find out why they're interested in being involved, and thank them for all of their help. Because really, without those kind of volunteers, this wouldn't be possible. So from there, the team travels to the Biogeoscience Institute, where there's an amazing classroom space and educational resources to synthesize their projects and try and figure out what is the story of their science. And this is one of my favorite lessons that I teach on this program, is how to turn your scientific experiment into a story. And hopefully I'm telling an okay story here today, because that's what I see myself as, not just sort of hard science remote sensor, but also a storyteller, because to me, the science doesn't mean anything unless it's in the context of a broader picture. And so we really try and get them to think about what it is that their experiment means in a bigger context, and how they've learned from it, and maybe how they've grown. This student in particular, this is a girl named Jordana, and her project in 2018 was really amazing, because she was so inspired by the personal change that she experienced on our program that she wanted to do her science experiment on her teammates. And so she's the first student ever in the history of Inspiring Girls Expeditions to take on a social science research project. And she designed a questionnaire to ask her teammates about their own personal growth, and was just super motivated to do this project on how the wilderness can change your self-perception. So we ask the girls to give a public presentation, and at the end of their time at the BGI, we invite the public to actually come and attend the talks. So they present their science and tell their story about what they've learned and what it means, including the data that they've looked at, but also thinking about the broader picture. So this is actually from the Girls on Ice Alaska team. But they calculated the number of Olympic swimming pools worth of water that melted off of the section of the glacier that they were measuring over the time that they were there on Gulkana, and how that affects the watershed and what that means in terms of the ecosystem that's using that water downstream. So all of these experiences that they have, we've seen have a real impact on on solidifying this sense of being part of a team. And in fact, the girls who participate in these programs go on to remain friends for many years. And we have many students who return and actually take on graduate studies in field science and participate as instructors down the line. So the first year that I was instructing on these programs, I was on Mount Baker, and our on-site coordinator was a former participant from one of the first years that Girls on Ice ran in the Cascades. So it's really created a community, an international community of women who are interested in supporting women moving forward in the future. So more than 250 girls have participated in these expeditions since they were founded. And these women go on to become scientists, mountaineers, teachers, artists, journalists, and they're really advocates for science, for the environment, and for women. So like I said, we have lots of returning participants who want to stay involved and help other women to have the same opportunity that they had. And that really creates this long-term network of alumni and instructors. I mean, even as an organizer for this program, the community of women that I've become involved with is really incredible and has changed my life in return. One of the founders of the Girls on Ice Alaska program, Joanna Young, is a recent graduate from her PhD at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and part of her PhD research was actually looking at the impact of these programs on participants. So her manuscript is in preparation, but she gave me some summary points to share with you guys today, because her research is really a great metric for the true impact of these programs. It's great to say we've seen this anecdotally, but she's actually trying to quantify and understand the ways that this program can personally impact the girls who participate. So over the course of her PhD, she conducted participant surveys both before and after girls participated on the expedition, and also in a follow-up survey. And what she found is that participants report a stronger sense of feeling related, especially through the understanding of ecosystem and the interconnections between different parts of the ecosystem. So they feel related to the environment in a way that they didn't before participating. Participants feel a strong sense of motivation to protect the environment after seeing the glacier landscape and seeing how it's changing, and particularly wanting others to experience what they experienced was inextricably tied to that feeling of wanting to protect the environment. So they want to preserve this beautiful landscape so that other people can have this experience that they had as well. And participants felt a strong sense that humans can either help or hurt nature, and drew parallels between a broader sense of helping and hurting nature and their choices that they made in camp to maybe pick up trash at their campsite, or make choices at home about their carbon footprint or their water usage. So they're drawing links between their own life choices and how that might have a broader impact in the environment. And unrelated to the sort of experience of the environment that Joanna was really trying to get at, she also found a really strong theme of participants' experience being on a rope team. So actually being part of a team traveling in this dangerous terrain, and that they felt empowered by the responsibility of being in charge of the safety of their peers, and that scary terrain can actually be overcome, that it's not impossible to walk on a glacier if you're from a big city and you've never been outside before, out in the wilderness. And both of these things, that feeling of being able to overcome what's scary and the empowerment of feeling responsible for your teammates, build a sense of competence in the outdoors, and that competence can pervade other parts of a woman's life. So these young women are able to feel that confidence in one area and transfer it to other parts of their experience. And these findings are in contrast with some literature that suggests that being in this scary outdoor situation can actually lead to distrust in the natural environment. So being in a precarious situation makes people withdraw and retreat from that natural environment. But in fact, what we found is that it pushes people to step up and take on the challenge. So this experience isn't just about what participants learn, but also what we all learn as instructors and as organizers for these programs. And what I've heard from participants coming out of these programs is that it's amazing for them to understand that science isn't just about being in a laboratory, right? Science is something we do all the time, even when we're not thinking about it. Leadership comes in more forms than we think. So a lot of participants actually report at the end of the program that they didn't realize that they were a leader because maybe they're soft-spoken, or maybe they prefer to be in a support role. But in fact, those are also forms of leadership. And leadership is about taking care of the whole team, not just about who speaks the loudest. Field science requires physical perseverance, so there is a connection between the challenges that you undertake physically and the kind of science that you do in the wilderness. And that this science really helps build a connection to nature. And that's something that Joanna's seen in her research, that I've seen in participants, that I've seen in myself, that I came into field science because I love to be able to interpret the landscape around me. So there's this connection that we can build, and that with that connection, people want to help preserve and take care of the environment. And that's part of what makes it so special for us to bring girls to the mountains that we have here in our backyard. Is the more people that care about them, the more that we're going to be able to save them, and that they'll be there for future generations. So thank you. Here's some research on gender in STEM. And if you want to find Inspiring Girls online, here's our website, our email address, and we're on Instagram and Facebook, Girls on Ice Canada, or you can find me here. So thank you.
So we've got time for questions.
Oh,
right away. Okay, great. Go ahead, John.
You told a good story indeed.
Thank you.
Could you tell us something more about the application and selection process?
Yeah, so the application is an online application that takes place in December and January, and it's a fairly involved process. We ask the participants or potential participants to write a number of short answer questions about their interest in science, their interest in art, how they connect with creativity. We ask them to reflect on something that they've learned in science recently, something in popular science, and what that means to them. And the application process actually goes to all the North American Inspiring Girls expeditions. So girls can select to apply to Canada, but they can also just apply to any program, and then we funnel applications into different program pools.
So you're not necessarily, and maybe you may have included this in the talk and I missed it, you're not necessarily in the Canadian program only seeing Canadian girls in it?
So in Canada, we only take Canadian girls, but the US expedition, some of them take Canadian girls as well. Yeah, so for now, we're only accepting Canadian girls because there are other programs in the US, and so we want to provide more opportunity for girls in Canada.
So one last
Yep.
supplementary question. How do you expect them to find you? You said it's an online application.
Yeah.
Are you in touch with boards of education to say, be aware of us, make them aware of it?
So we've done a bit of targeted outreach like that, talking to school boards, teachers that we know personally. we've gotten a lot of attention from the National Science Foundation, National Geographic, and some other sort of North America-wide organizations that promote activities for women. So A Mighty Girl is one that, not just activities, but they promote a lot for women in general and young girls. And so that's primarily how we have gotten applicants in the past. Something that we're trying to do in Canada is do more targeted outreach to communities outside of Western Canada, to rural communities, to First Nations communities, and especially to northern communities, because we really want to see our application pool grow. Right now, we primarily see applications from Alberta and BC, with a handful from other parts of the country. And occasionally, last year we had a girl from the Yukon who came, but we do really want to reach out to other communities who might not necessarily see that kind of online word of mouth promotion. Yeah.
Do you also provide them with the kind of gear that they're going to need?
Yeah.
Because that would be a real limitation.
Yeah, absolutely. So because we want to be barrier-free, we don't expect them to have any experience, we don't expect them to have any equipment, and we don't expect them to pay.
Yeah.
So we ask participants to help fundraise for their travel or pay for it if they can. If they can't, we provide that for them. And then they arrive and we have a storage locker full of gear. If you have anything you're getting rid of, we're always accepting donations. So that we can provide them with not just a sleeping bag and a backpack and a set of crampons, but also maybe they need hiking pants, maybe they need a rain jacket. So everything that they need, we try and have enough that if they don't have it, we can provide it. Yeah.
Getting back to the application process,
Mm-hmm.
do you discriminate against girls that have a fair amount of outdoor experience because the impact wouldn't be as great as somebody who's getting right off the suburban Toronto?
No.
Or is it more open to anybody who applies?
It's open to anybody, and what we really try and do is, and it's a very difficult process because there are so many amazing applications, but we try and read the applications with an ear towards who might gain the most or grow the most from the experience. So it's not necessarily that they maybe don't go into the outdoors. Maybe they don't have a parent who's encouraging them to pursue something that they're really excited about. Maybe they don't have the financial means to go to science camp. Maybe, who knows what that is. There's not discrimination towards any one category of applicant. And then, in fact, when we do funnel applications into these different pools for different expeditions, the instructors choose the final team, and one of the goals that we're trying to fulfill when we choose the team is actually to have a diverse team, so that we have girls from different parts of the country, from different kinds of backgrounds, who have different personalities and different interests.
It's often a big surprise, isn't it? Because, you sometimes take people into the field and you discover the most unlikely person is actually one of the best field members.
Yeah, exactly. And if they aren't given an opportunity, then they won't ever know that either.
No.
And so that's really what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Is Joanna tracking or keeping in touch with the girls to see who actually ends up going into STEM?
So right now we are working on a more fuller alumni engagement plan for Inspiring Girls Expeditions as a whole. So we do sort of keep in touch with alumni and have rough ideas of what people are doing, but we don't have a real tracking system right now to figure out what paths people are taking after the program.
It could be so cool to see,
Yeah.
100% of our girls.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that's been really exciting about the growth that we've had in Inspiring Girls over the last few years especially is that we finally have more capacity to actually undertake things like that. And up until the last few years, it's been a constant race to get ready for the next expedition, and then everybody's exhausted, and then you do it again. And so with the growth, we finally have more people on board who can actually take on tasks like working with alumni and looking at broader strategies. We had a diversity, equity, and inclusion training last year that wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have sort of a bigger organization now helping make things happen.
How long are some of those hikes? How long was that hike into the...
Up to the Asilkan hike?
Yeah.
So it takes us all day. So usually, like, I think we try and leave the trailhead by 9 or 9:30, and we get there by 6. So it's a big day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a big, long uphill.
Yeah. And the volunteers end up doing it about half the time, which is amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
It was really interesting that you found that all of your participants felt really safe with you. And do you think that the reason you found that as opposed to previous findings was because that all of the instructors on Girls Night are like really like confident and like make the participants feel safe, like especially?
I think that could be part of it. I don't want to speak too much for Joanna's research, but just from my personal experience, I think that part of it is the supportive environment of the instructors, that we early on in the program really do try and foster this sense of taking care of each other. But I also think that it is, like as Joanna's findings said, this feeling of empowerment, right? That it's not just about instructors keeping you safe, it's about being responsible for keeping your teammates safe. That, you know, if I'm, as an instructor leading a rope team on a glacier, I can only do so much to make sure that the girl at the end of the rope is as safe as she can be, right? And so it's actually the job of the person who's in front of her to help keep her safe. And that kind of responsibility helps to foster that sense of safety and feeling of safety in the environment.
One of the things I liked is that you built some art into it, and also opportunities for people to express things in a different way, not just just looking at the biological system, but sort of integrating it into other thoughts you might have about out there. And sometimes I think that, say, as an editor, I notice that writing is a good thing for people to help each other write better, scientists and people who have particular good skills of expressing.
Yeah, I think there are so many links between creative practice and science that we ignore, and that people want to put scientists in this box of being like, whatever, super rigid people, but really we're problem solvers, we're creative too, and this is an opportunity to see how that connects. How can you use art to look differently at what you're trying to learn about the environment, or how can you use it to enhance what your understanding is? And express it. I read a really cool article a while ago about coding and knitting, and I'm a knitter and I'm a programmer, and so I was like, oh my god, it's so true. Like a knitting pattern is a code, and that there is this link between the art and science and what we do.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. That was a
Yeah.
great talk.
Thank you.